What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So before I get into the news this week, I first just want to say that like all of you, I'm very heartbroken by all this crazy stuff happening in Ukraine, and it's just so depressing to see, a needless war, especially with all the other crap going on in the world these days. And I just feel for all the citizens of Ukraine there, and I really, really hope this whole thing is resolved and peace is restored as soon as possible. And it's just terrible to see. So obviously all the news I'm covering this week doesn't really matter very much in the grand scheme of things, but for those who are still interested to see, what new stuff came out here this week, let's get into it. So Ford this week has revealed the global version of the Ford Ranger Raptor, and Ford CEO did confirm this week that it will be coming to America and Canada next year, along with the regular next-gen Ranger. It's a bummer that it's at least a year away though, but great that it's still at least being offered here, so very exciting to see this coming. So the new Ranger Raptor here is going to be running the same 3-liter EcoBoost V6 as the Bronco Raptor, but strangely we'll be getting less power. So Roadshow's reporting it'll do 392 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque here in the States, which is a few less horsepower than what the Bronco Raptor does, which they're saying is going to be like over 400 horsepower, I believe. But anyway, also in Europe, it's going to be tuned completely differently, I guess, because they're saying it's only going to be doing 284 horsepower and 362 pound-feet of torque there for some reason. Other parts of the world will also be able to get it with the 2-liter twin-turbo diesel from the previous generation Ranger Raptor as well, especially those places that, get taxed by displacement. Anyway, all these Ranger Raptors are going to be running the 10-speed automatic, and it'll also have, along with that, a 4-mode exhaust system, an anti-lag system, just like the Bronco Raptor as well, to help keep that turbo spooled up. And it also gets similar suspension and chassis improvements to the other Raptors with Fox live valve shocks and aluminum upper and lower control arms, among other things. It even has bottom-out control, which will max out the shock stamping force for the last 25% of the suspension travel to help prevent the truck from bottoming out. Even if it does, though, the truck has plenty of skid plates, of course, to protect everything on the underside as well. It also has the same Raptor drive modes, and the Raptor formula remains unchanged for the outside with the big Ford grille, wider fenders, more rugged bumpers, and Raptor graphics. Same goes for the inside with sportier seats and steering wheel, orange accents, and all the best tech Ford has there, including a 12-inch touchscreen and the 12.4-inch digital gauges. It'll be arriving in Europe in the fourth quarter of this year, and then there's no word on exactly when it'll arrive here, whenever it does, show up sometime next year. But it's also worth mentioning, especially as far as stuff in Europe goes, with all the shakeup of everything, who knows what's going to happen with this war and stuff. So all these timelines for everything now are completely up in the air once again. Again, definitely not a big concern. There's much more important things to worry about in the world, but just keep that in mind with all of these expected release dates for stuff, especially the stuff in Europe. And we have some exciting news here for fans of the internal combustion engine this week, and Toyota and Yamaha's new announcement. So every time Toyota and Yamaha team up, it always produces some pretty epic engines. That was how the LFA's V10 got made. This V8 engine that Lexus has been running for the past 10 years was also a partnership with Yamaha. And so this time Yamaha and Toyota have announced a partnership here to develop a new V8 engine that runs on hydrogen. So it's based on the Lexus 5-liter V8, but was then modified with several new parts, including new injectors, cylinder heads, and intake manifold to accommodate the new fuel. And while it's not as powerful as the gas version, it's not far off, making 455 horsepower at 6,800 RPMs and 398 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPMs. Alongside this new engine, though, was also a joint announcement made by Toyota, Yamaha, Subaru, Mazda, and Kawasaki, saying that they will begin discussions for conducting collaborative research into possible avenues for expanding the range of fuel options for internal combustion engines in the quest for carbon neutrality. So, clearly, they really want to find a way to keep engines around and still do it in a environmentally friendly way. And so There's a bunch of little statements made here. And so Yamaha Motors president added that hydrogen engines house the potential to be carbon neutral while keeping our passion for the internal combustion engine alive at the same time. And also added that teaming up with companies with different corporate cultures and areas of expertise, as well as growing the number of partners we have, is how we want to lead the way into the future. And so they're already testing this engine in a prototype car, and one of the people doing the research and development for it added to this whole announcement that I started to see that engines using only hydrogen for fuel actually had very fun, easy to use performance characteristics, and also said here that hydrogen engines have an innately friendly feel that makes them easy to use even without resorting to electronic driving aids. Everyone who came to test drive the prototype car would start off somewhat skeptical, but emerge from the car with a big smile on their face at the end. As I watched this, I started to believe that there is actually enormous potential in the characteristics unique to hydrogen engines instead of simply treating it as a substitute for gasoline. So, that all sounds very promising, because if not only is it just going to allow us to have engines, but if they're going to have cool, unique traits with hydrogen burning engines, that all sounds fantastic, except there's one literal elephant in the room, and that is that the hydrogen tanks that are required to run these hydrogen powered cars, the tanks are enormous. It's not like you can run the same kind of small tank that you do in some of the hydrogen stuff like the Toyota Mirai and the Hyundai Nexo. It's a lot different, and so when you're actually burning the hydrogen, it's a lot less efficient, and you have to have massive tanks. There's a Toyota Corolla race car I covered last year that is already racing around with basically a hydrogen version of the GR Yaris motor. And that thing, the entire back seat of the Toyota Corolla hatchback is taken up from floor to ceiling with hydrogen tanks. So, maybe something like this could work if, you can do some type of like MR2 type thing where you have the engine in the front that's tiny, but then you have, huge tanks in the back where you would have a mid-engine setup or something. They'd have to get real creative with how they're going to, package these enormous tanks of hydrogen. So that's really the biggest problem. If they can find a way to either make these engines wildly more efficient so they can use a lot less hydrogen, or find some creative way to package the tanks or something. I don't know how they would solve that. I mean, it sounds like, they still sound great, these engines, when they're burning hydrogen. They're still obviously just as powerful almost as gas powered, versions of these engines are and stuff. So it all sounds great. It's just like, who wants to drive around with, enormous tanks behind them? It's not practical. So could make for really cool race cars, maybe for racing or something. This could be totally fine, but I don't ever see this being anything in a production vehicle. I think if we do get hydrogen, which still seems like a far-fetched thing, it'll most likely be to power an electric thing, like you see with the Nexo and the Mirai, and I wouldn't expect it to, be burning anything anytime soon. So another thing that sounds very promising, much like, the e-fuels and stuff. But will these things actually replace EVs? I don't think so. Maybe a long, long time from now. But, I think for the foreseeable few decades here, I still think that EVs probably are going to be the ones that actually make the most sense, especially considering hydrogen infrastructure is tiny even compared to electric infrastructure out there. So anyway, but very interesting to at least see that development, and great to see that, Japan is really working hard here on trying to come up with a hydrogen solution, which I think certainly would make sense. I'd love to see this take over for the EVs down the road, but it's just kind of interesting to see how they plan to work around all these obstacles. But moving on here, we have a few new cars that were prematurely leaked out this week. So first, we got our first glimpse at the Ferrari Purosangue SUV, thanks to Coche Spias on Instagram. So we see some tight shots here of the front and the back in what appears to be a Ferrari facility, and overall it looks similar in shape to a lifted GTC4 Lusso in my opinion, but with a much sharper front end there and a back end that shares some styling with the new 296 GTB, especially in the taillights, which were basically identical and stuff. So we don't still know much about the mechanical details of this. The safe bet is it'll run the twin turbo V8 you see in the other, kind of mainstream Ferraris. It could use the same setup as the 296 GTB, meaning hybrid twin turbo V6. That, could make a lot more sense as well. I'd love to see a V12, but I wouldn't hold your breath for that. But anyway, cool to at least see a first glimpse of that. I personally think it actually looks really good, but let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Another car that leaked out of a factory here is what is most likely going to be called the Dodge Hornet, was spotted in the Alfa Romeo Tonale factory thanks to a video that was briefly uploaded to Facebook and then posted to autoperari.com. And so we only see a side shot here of the front and a shot of the interior. And the front shows it'll definitely be based on the Tonale, but with Dodge styling traits. You can see here like the narrow grille, the vented hood, for example. Inside, though, it looks like it's going to be nearly identical to the Tonale, which is good for the Dodge, because it's a very nice interior. I covered the Tonale last week, but I think this definitely takes some of the luster off of the Alfa, because if Dodge is going to have basically the same thing just with different styling, it just makes the Alfa seem a little less unique. But yeah, we will see how this all plays out for the two companies. Obviously, the Dodge will be cheaper, so that also could kind of undermine the Tonale. So I really hope this doesn't kind of sink Alfa Romeo, especially here in the States. But mechanically, if it's going to be using the Tonale's stuff here for the most part, then that means you'll be getting a 2-liter 4-cylinder that does 256 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Although it's the same motor the Stelvio and Giulia use, which means it could have 280 horsepower. So there's a potential this could even have more power than the Tonale, which would really throw the Tonale under the bus. But we'll see about that. It's also most likely going to be getting the 272 horsepower plug-in hybrid version that the Tonale also gets, with about 30 miles of electric range. And so anyway, this Dodge Hornet is expected to be a 2023 model vehicle, meaning we should get some details on it here in the next 6 months, if not sooner. But anyway, interesting to see that. That's another one I'm sure will be very controversial. Let me know what you think about Dodge taking the Tonale and muscling it up a little bit here in the comments below. Also, we got our first look this week at the 2023 Honda CR-V, thanks to Kurdistan Automotive Blog on Instagram, who discovered a patent image here for it. And so, Honda's already declared 2022 as the year of the crossover for them. They're planning on new versions of the CR-V, the Pilot, I think even the Accord as well. The HR-V is coming. It's going to be a whole bunch of stuff. And so, this is one of the ones we will be seeing a full reveal here this year of the CR-V. But as you can see here, it's definitely grown and gained some sharper styling, which we already saw with some spy shots that came out, in the past, year or so here. So no big surprises there, but definitely still recognizable as a CR-V. And, I think it actually looks pretty good. But again, let me know what you think of that styling in the comments below. Also, for some official Honda Motors news here, Acura actually confirmed to Motor One that the ILX will be done after the 2022 model year to make room for the Integra. That was already assumed and something we knew was probably going to happen, but now it's just we have the official confirmation the 2022 model year will be the last for the ILX. And, I'm kind of bummed the ILX didn't have more glory in its life here, because I just always thought it was a compelling package. You had the K24 naturally aspirated VTEC high revving motor. You had an 8-speed dual clutch, which is what everyone says they want as a dual clutch. It had that with the Civic Si kind of motor. I know it had a lower red line, but very promising package. This is kind of like a car that you'd think everyone would have been jumping all over, and yet no one was into it. I've never driven one. At least the newer version, I drove the very first model year of the ILX when it was very underpowered. But since then, they've added a lot more power, a lot of great enhancements. I'd love to try one out. They just never had one in the press fleet, but I'd love to try one out someday. But it's just kind of been a mystery to me why that car didn't do better. But anyway, it's irrelevant because it is dying here, and the Integra will almost certainly be a huge improvement in just about every way. And so anyway, just interesting to hear that. Mazda UK this week has debuted a short teaser video for the CX-60 that is coming, and shows some close-ups here of the interior before the full debut happens on March 8th. And so it looks to be using interesting textiles and stitching here, as you can see. And we've already seen what the front end looks like as well, thanks to some spy shots that were taken during filming of a commercial for it. And so it looks kind of bland, at least in that one shot. We'll see, if it looks a little bit better whenever the full reveal happens. But anyway, this will supposedly be the first Mazda vehicle to use the new rear-wheel drive based platform with the straight 6 engine. We'll see if that does end up happening here with these. Rumors have also suggested that we will not be getting the CX-60 here in the States, that instead, like the rest of the world is going to be getting a CX-60 and CX-80. We'll be getting supposedly a wider CX-70 and CX-90 here in the States instead. So we'll see, if that actually, turns out to be the case or not. But anyway, interesting to at least see the teaser here. And whatever we end up getting, it'll most likely have a very similar interior to what you're going to be seeing here on March 8th. And styling on the outside that could also be very similar too. But anyway, interesting to see that. We also now have a reveal date for the new electric DeLorean that's coming. That the teaser I was talking about that last week. This week we have info, and they say it's going to be debuting in August at Pebble Beach, and it will preview a low volume production model. And so I'm very excited to see what they do with it. They said it will have some sporty characteristics. They are going to be using the platform from somebody else. Obviously, they're a very small company, but it'd be interesting to see what they do as far as what EV platform it uses and how they style it and stuff. Yeah, so anyway, cool to know when we'll be seeing that. Volvo this week is joining in with the dark trim trend that most other car companies these days have been doing, and so they debuted the 2022 S60 Black Edition. So the package can be added to any S60 and darkens the grille, badges, window trim, exhaust tips, and wheels. It'll also only be coming in either white or black, and only adds $700 to the price of the car, which is pretty reasonable. And only 450 of these will be made, they say, for the 2022 model year. I'm assuming obviously it will continue on beyond this first year, but for the first year here, only 450. And I gotta say, I think these look really good all blacked out there, especially in black. I'm assuming they'll probably make this package available for all the other models in the lineup eventually, especially if this one does well. But anyway, so cool to see that. And two electric vehicles that actually got improvements here this week with higher ranges were the Mustang Mach-E and the Volkswagen ID.4. So first, the 2022 Mach-E has been officially rated and retested by the EPA here, after Ford unlocked an additional 3 kilowatt hours of battery in the battery pack. And so now it increases the max range to 314 miles for the California Route 1 rear-wheel drive trim, which is the most efficient of all the Mach-Es, with the other trims increasing by anywhere between 3 and 17 miles of range. And so meaningful improvements, especially since the biggest jumps are with that smaller battery pack. So even those ones are now going to be doing, over 220 miles of range, which is great, that they're all, getting some pretty good improvements there. And then again, the EPA also retested the Volkswagen ID.4 after it made some software changes, no battery changes on that. And, so it gets the biggest increases on the rear-wheel drive version of the ID.4, adding 20 miles of extra range for a max of 280 miles now, for that rear-wheel drive version. The all-wheel drive versions only gain between 2 and 5 miles of range though, so clearly they must have optimized something really good for the rear-wheel drive version and not so much for the all-wheel drive. So those still max out at just 251 miles of range. But Volkswagen, along with that, also announced that they improved the charging rate slightly. It goes from like 125 kilowatt charging to 135. Still not super impressive, but an improvement nonetheless. And also they announced that the simpler plug-in charge functionality with Electrify America chargers will be arriving later this year. And so that's supposed to simplify things because you don't have to have a million different apps to charge. You'll just be able to plug in, it'll figure it out and charge your account, and you won't have to worry about, any other hoops to jump through like you are currently having to worry about. So anyway, very interesting to hear all that from Volkswagen. Faraday Future this week has made marked a huge milestone here where they've finally revealed the production-ready version of their first product, the FF91, and announced the car has reached the pre-production phase at its factory in California. So they are actually now building these things in production form, orange side marker lights and all. So, I mean, this is the real deal now. So I can now take them seriously as a company now that they're actually building these things. They haven't revealed any new specs here for them, but the previous prototypes had 3 motors and 1,050 horsepower. So these are all going to be, very high-end, very expensive things. They are going to have cheaper, smaller models eventually, but this first one's going to be very expensive, although we don't have final pricing, I don't think, for these yet. But anyway, these pre-production cars will now be tested all over the world before Faraday Future plans to start regular production of the FF91 in the third quarter of this year. So a little bit of a tight timeline to only be, testing them for about 6 months in other places. I'm sure they already have been testing them, obviously, over the past couple of years here, but they're planning to start building these things, before the end of this year, which is impressive. And so yeah, huge congrats to them, because, I mean, there's a lot of these EV companies that are going to come and go. We'll see how many of them actually make it and actually survive. And but at least Faraday Future is now at the point of actually building real cars and, getting them out on the road. So very cool to hear that, and congrats to them. Another company trying to get into the electric car game, Fisker, they just teased their second car that right now they're calling Project PEAR, which stands for Personal Electric Automotive Revolution. And so it's being jointly developed with Foxconn, which is really the only reason to take this one seriously. Because Foxconn, I mean, they build the iPhone. They're a massive company with enormous amounts of money. And so with them backing this thing, I think there's a lot better chance that this actually does come to fruition here. And they plan to start building this model in Ohio in 2024, and they claim prices will be starting at $29,900 before government incentives. They also claim it'll have intuitive controls, sporty driving, clever storage, and a focus on industry first. Unfortunately, though, all they're revealing now is just this like picture of the roof of it, and that's all we see. So yeah, I wish there was a little bit more like a render or something. It would be nice to see. But anyway, they also very optimistically hope to eventually build 250,000 of these things annually, which is also very ambitious. So we'll see if that actually, ever happens. It all sounds great, but I think we first have to wait and see if their first model actually even arrives and comes to fruition before the second one, because the Ocean, which is their, mainstream crossover EV that they've been planning, that has already been delayed about a year, and it's only going to be built at Magna Steyr in Austria by the end of this year, they claim. Again, we'll see what happens with Europe and stuff. That could complicate this further. But so yeah, if that one does come here by the end of this year, then maybe people can start taking Fisker a little more seriously. It's still a mystery as far as what they're going to do with servicing and all that type of stuff. But regardless, at least this new one is being financed by Foxconn, developed jointly with them. So that should give us a lot more credibility and help this thing to actually, become a reality here. And if you're interested in this vehicle, just based on those few things I mentioned and that very vague teaser, Fisker will gladly take a $250 reservation now while you wait to hold your place in line for one of these. I don't think the line's very long, so I wouldn't worry about rushing to reserve one now. But we'll see, what ends up happening with all that. Lastly, the new Nissan Z Forum surprisingly found a very cool patent by Hyundai this week. And so this patent is for a sliding tailgate for SUVs that allows it to slide above the roof, making it easier to open in tight spaces or garages especially. And it's one of those ideas that makes so much sense that you wonder why everyone isn't doing this already. Maybe there's some reason why, and maybe some of it's just, it's not broke, so don't fix it as far as the traditional tailgate goes. But I think this would be great. As someone who, parks, vehicles in a garage, whenever I have an SUV that I have to put in the garage, it's always a pain opening the hatch, especially with the garage door closed. So this would be fantastic. The only problem, of course, is people with roof racks and stuff on their roof. Obviously, that would kind of make this an issue. I'm sure they would have some other way of getting into the back there. But aside from that, I think this makes a ton of sense. Bravo to Hyundai for coming up with another very innovative idea here and something that makes a ton of sense. So hopefully this makes it to a production vehicle someday. But anyway, very cool to see that. But anyway, that's it for all the news this week, guys. So let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. And thank you guys very much for watching. Please continue to stay safe and healthy, especially my viewers there in Ukraine. Please continue to stay safe out there. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.